Hi, I'm Charles Linden. The first thing I want to do is welcome you to the Linden Method programme and assure you that you've finally found the cure for your anxiety disorder, whether that be generalised anxiety disorder, panic attacks, agoraphobia, OCD or post-traumatic stress disorder. There are a few things that myself and my support specialists always tell new clients. It's absolutely vital that you understand that to undermine the subconscious anxious habit that causes your anxiety disorder, you have to put a structure in place. Now that structure has to be all-encompassing. You have to become passionate about things. And when I say passionate, I mean you need to find a level of distraction, of intellectual challenge that completely diverts your anxious thoughts. Now this isn't easy, and it takes time, and it sometimes takes a lot of patience to discover the things that you can put into your life to create that level of diversion. Now, the first thing I want to ask you to do is to think about things that you can do in your life to create diversion. The problem is that your intellectual mind isn't being challenged. In fact, it's bored. Because you have emotional intelligence, the intelligence that gives you creativity, and not the intelligence that gives you academic ability, your mind becomes bored very easily. And because your intellect is bored, your anxiety has the space it needs to move around and create and somatise the anxious condition. Now, what I want you to do is to be able to fill every second of every day with activity. And by doing this, you reach a level of intellectual challenge that drives your anxiety out. And this is absolutely vital to your recovery. And it's actually the steps that every single recovered anxiety sufferer in the world have taken to drive out their anxiety, without exception. Now, the level of intellectual challenge that you need personally, it could be quite high, it could be quite low. We're all different. I don't know where you are in the world and what you do and how you spend your time. So it's important that you challenge your core beliefs about your anxiety and address this issue directly. Now, there are ways of doing this in a very structured way. Now, you might be lucky enough to have a very full life, and if you have, that doesn't mean that the fullness of your life is actually producing the effect of driving out the anxiety. Just because you're busy doing the shopping, looking after children, doing your job, walking the dog, or listening to your iPod, doesn't mean that those intellectual challenges are enough for your intellectual mind and your creativity. Anxiety is a learned behaviour. And like any learned behaviour, whether that be learning to write, learning to read or drive a car, it's done through repetition. Clearly there was an initial anxious catalyst that set you into this cycle of anxiety. But once you're in that cycle, and because you repeat that cycle over and over again, and because you become anxious about the symptoms that you experience in that cycle, the anxiety causes behaviours, causes anxiety, causes behaviours, and before very long, your subconscious has taken on those behaviours as a habit, an instinctual habit, and your subconscious mind is feeding your anxiety on a loop. But anxiety in its core is an emotion. Like happiness or sadness, it's an emotion. The good thing about the emotion of fear, anxiety, is that it's adaptable. It has to be adaptable because we have to adapt to our environments. Some people live in war-torn places or places where there's immense danger every day as they walk down the street. Other people live like I do in the UK, and it's a very, very safe environment. So when people move from one country to another, for example, if somebody's born in the UK and they move to an Amazonian rainforest, for argument's sake, their anxiety levels have to adapt to the environment they go into. They have to be prepared for any dangers that they might encounter. And the same happens when somebody moves from one of those dangerous areas to somewhere safe, like Europe. I know of somebody that lived in South America who lived in an environment that was very dangerous, and their anxiety preset had become reset at a level that was suitable for their environment in South America. But when they moved to the UK, they had to adapt to this environment. I remember them saying how safe they felt in the UK and how they become calmer in their life. So the emotion of fear and anxiety has to be adaptable to adapt to our environment through history as well. And as humans, we haven't developed much. In fact, it was only about 100 years ago that the first escalator was installed in a shop, and it was actually Harrods in London. And 2 people were employed to give people brandy and smelling salts. And as humans, we haven't evolved that much since then, physically, but emotionally we've had to evolve very, very quickly. And the problem is, because people now move at 1,000 miles an hour sometimes in aircrafts around the world through time zones, and they drive fast cars and drive on fast planes and do very stressful jobs, The problem is that our physical selves haven't adapted, but our mental selves have had to adapt very, very quickly. And we're very fortunate that fear has that adaptability. So what I'm saying to you is it's very simple to see how anxiety can actually be reset down to a more appropriate level. And the way that you do this is by training it, by building an environment for change and challenging your core beliefs about your anxiety and almost forcing your mind to take on new anxious behaviours. Now this sounds very simplistic, and it is, but what you need is structure. And that structure comes in the form of a process, basically an anxiety elimination process, and that's what the Linda method is all about. This program will teach you how to put a process in place, a constant process that forces your brain to take on those new behaviours and to become non-anxious. But how do we do that? Well, it's very, very simple. The content of the Linda method program will give you advice about symptoms and about things that you can do to force the anxiety out of your life, and it'll also give you some reassurance. But the structure of the program comes from the 9 pillars, which you'll now read after you've listened to what I've got to say. And it also comes from the support you get from my counselling staff. Now, the reason they're there really is to be compliance officers. And what I mean by compliance officers is that they're there to put you back on the tracks when you come off them. But I want to give you some structure here and now. And that structure starts with 2 sheets of paper. And I'll show you those sheets of paper right now so that you understand what they are. The first one is a list. Now what I want you to do is I want you to get a sheet of paper and I want you to separate the piece of paper down the middle. And on the left side I want you to put a title. Things I've done before but would like to do again. Now these things are the things you've already experienced in your life. Things that you did perhaps before your anxiety even started. Things that you even did in your childhood. But things that you really enjoyed doing. Things that you're limited from doing now because of your anxiety disorder. And in the other column, I'd like you to make a list of new things I'd like to do. Now, these things are things that you haven't tried yet in your life, so you have no experience of them. But they're things that if you didn't give any regard to your anxiety disorder, things that you do tomorrow, things that you want to try. Now, clearly these things could include things like bungee jumping or parascending or travelling to space. But obviously these are unrealistic things. What you need to do is make a list of realistic things that you can do and try. But don't limit these things to things that your anxiety allows you to do. You know, if something is on there that, for example, cycling Hadrian's Wall or walking the Great Wall of China or, you know, walking up Mount Snowdon, put them on the list. You might strike them out later as things that aren't possible, but put them on the list because they're things that you want to do. And this list is absolutely vital. Now, the second thing I want you to do is I want you to go and buy yourself this style of diary. Now this is the style of diary that lists each day but then breaks the day down into half-hour segments. So it starts at 7:30 and goes 8, 8:30, 9, 9:30 and so on throughout the day. It's vital you get this format of diary because what I want you to do is build structure into your daily routine. Now when you've done this, and you might be doing this with your partner or a loved one, somebody who knows you, what I want you to do is every evening is sit down, take your lists of the things that you could do with your life, and I want you to fill in the diary. So start at 7:30 in the morning. But first of all, what you need to do is put in the things that you can't avoid doing. So in other words, getting the children ready for school, taking the children to school, cleaning, shopping, your job, things that you know you're going to have to do during that day structure, put in first of all. These things are absolutely crucial to your recovery. But why are they crucial? Because they give structure to your day. Because what they do is they create these non-anxious habits, these non-anxious behaviours that drive out the anxious behaviour from your subconscious mind. Now you have to imagine that anxiety has been built because of repetition, like I said before. And all the time you're behaving anxiously, you're repeating that behaviour in a way that it has been stored as subconscious behaviour in the mind. So new neural pathways are being learned and stored in your mind. And what we need to do now using these devices is drive out and render obsolete those neural pathways, replace them with non-anxious neural pathways. And this can be done. It's a very, very well-known psychotherapeutic technique. But often it's done in a very unstructured way. So what I'm doing is showing you a structure that will do this, will create an environment for change that will drive that anxious behaviour out of your subconscious mind. It's absolutely vital that you don't give the mind what I call mind space. Now what is that? Mind space is the time when you're not thinking about anything in particular and the anxiety floods back in again. Like the stomach, you have to give your mind food. It needs something to chew on. And the stomach gets indigestion if it isn't fed. The mind gets indigestion, which manifests itself as anxiety. Now, because you're a superior intellect, because you have this emotional intelligence that some people have in small quantities, some people don't have very much at all, but because you have this, your mind needs challenge. Because your intellect needs food to chew on. And when it isn't given that mind food, it finds its own food to chew on, and anxiety floods in, and before long you start experiencing panic attacks and obsessive compulsive disorder and all the things that manifest themselves as a result of you having too much mind space. It's absolutely vital that you understand the structure of the Linden method, and that you understand that by driving out these anxious behaviours and thoughts, you will become completely anxiety-free. If you put in place the rules and the principles that I've outlined to you and that you read in the Linden method box, recovery is absolutely inevitable. What I've tried to do is put myself in that box. And what I mean by that is that obviously I made a recovery based on what I experienced in life. And I've condensed down and distilled a process that works for every single sufferer. And that box, that Linden method pack, contains all of those elements. So read the manual. Understand what you're experiencing in terms of your symptoms. Put in place the principles outlined in the 9 pillars. These are absolutely vital to your recovery. Because what you want to stop doing, absolutely, is to remind your subconscious mind that you're an anxious person. And by putting those principles in place, you're removing the behaviours that send that message to your subconscious. Couple that with the diversion techniques that I've just described, the lists and the diary making, which allow you to put structure into your life, to become the non-anxious person that you want to be. And I promise you, within days, you'll become non-anxious. Your anxiety will reduce down and will become reset at your preset genetic level of anxiety. This isn't going to get rid of your anxiety completely, because you need anxiety in certain situations. This will get rid of your inappropriate anxiety, the anxiety that causes all of the symptoms, sensations and thoughts that you experience on a daily basis. It'll get rid of the disorder. So, I reiterate again, read the Linden Method Manual. Use the CDs and the supportive material in the pack whenever you need to use them, because they are helpful, but they're first aid techniques. The Panic Eliminator, for example, is a fantastic track that you can listen to, and it will teach you how to get rid of your panic attacks and how to undermine them when they're happening. But the core of the programme is in the 9 pillars and in what I've just described. The Linden Method support specialists are there to help you to be compliant to the Linden Method. And what I mean by that is that if you put in place the things that we tell you to do in the Linden Method manual and the things I've just told you to do on this video, your complete recovery is inevitable. But if you're not doing those things, your recovery will become stunted, slowed down or stopped. It's like baking a cake. If I give you instruction on how to bake a cake and you go away and bake the cake but forget to put the eggs in or forget to put the flour in, you don't get a cake. This is a recipe for success, a recipe for anxiety elimination. But you have to put all the elements together to get the complete curative result. So move forward quickly, make your lists, keep your diary, and before long you'll be completely anxiety free. That I assure you. And if you need support, we'll talk to you. Take care.